No one knew the trash picker was a queen until this happened. At dawn, when the palace bells slept and the city still breathed in whispers, Queen Eleanor wrapped herself in rags and stepped through the servants' gate alone. The crown was hidden beneath a scarf torn at the edges, her rings buried in a pouch she left behind. For the first time since her coronation, her feet touched the street without guards, and the weight she carried was not gold, but fear for her only son. Prince Rowan had rejected every noblewoman presented to him. He longed for kindness, not pedigree, for a woman who would love him when power fell silent. Eleanor listened from behind silk curtains as courtiers mocked his softness. At night, she prayed to the old saints for a sign. At last, she chose disguise over despair. She joined the trash pickers at the river bend, where the city discarded what it no longer valued. There, among broken jars and wilted flowers, Eleanor bent her back and learned the ache of hunger. She told no one her name. They called her Old Lynn. Coins were scarce, insults plentiful, and yet her heart beat with a strange hope. Each day she watched people when they thought no one important was watching. She saw hands that snatched and hands that shared. She listened to laughter born of cruelty and to songs hummed to survive sorrow. In those moments, she understood how thin the line was between dignity and ruin. One evening, rain poured like judgment. The pickers scattered, but a young woman remained, shielding a limping boy with her shawl. She gave him her bread and smiled as if warmth were endless. Eleanor felt something loosen in her chest. She followed the girl from a distance, careful as a shadow. The girl lived in a leaning house with walls patched by patience. Inside, she washed the boy's wound, whispering comfort instead of complaint. When Eleanor pretended to stumble at the door, the girl welcomed her in, offering tea made from scraps. "We share what we have," she said simply. They spoke until night folded the streets. The girl's name was Mara. She worked by day, studied by candlelight, and dreamed of nothing grander than peace. Eleanor returned to her borrowed corner under the bridge, trembling, convinced fate had finally answered her. But as the moon rose, a black carriage stopped nearby. Men stepped out, searching the shadows, calling for Mara by name. Eleanor's heart froze. She realized then that kindness often grows where danger has already taken root. Whatever followed would test her disguise, her courage, and the truth she was willing to reveal. Hidden behind darkness, Eleanor watched silently, torn between running and revealing herself. The queen in her screamed for command, for soldiers, for law. The mother in her feared that the choice she made tonight would decide her son's future, and perhaps the soul of the kingdom itself. She held her breath, knowing this path could never be walked backward again, without bloodshed mercy. The men reached for Mara, their boots splashing through puddles like threats given form. Eleanor felt the instinct of command surge within her, but she crushed it down, remembering the rags on her back. Instead, she stepped forward, her voice cracked and small, pretending to be only Old Lynn. "Leave the girl," she pleaded, hands shaking convincingly. "She's done nothing." One man laughed, sharp and careless. "She owes debts," he said. "Debts don't care about kindness." Mara pulled the boy behind her, her eyes calm despite the fear trembling in her hands. "I will work," she said. "Give me time. Please don't frighten him." Her courage was quiet, but it rang louder than the rain. Eleanor studied her closely. Even cornered, Mara did not beg for herself alone. She bargained for the child's peace. The queen felt a fierce ache behind her eyes. These were the moments no court ever revealed, the moments where true worth showed its face. Moved by impulse and desperation, Eleanor did the unthinkable. She reached into her torn sleeve and produced the small coin she had hidden, the last remnant of her former life. "Take this," she said. "It's all I have, but it's something." The men scoffed, yet greed flickered. They took the coin and warned Mara with cold smiles that they would return. When the carriage vanished into the fog, Mara collapsed onto the step, breathless. Eleanor sat beside her, holding her hand as though it were a lifeline. "Why help me?" Mara asked softly. "You barely know me." Eleanor searched for an answer that would not betray her crown. "Because I know what it is to fear for a child," she said, and it was truth enough. In the days that followed, Eleanor stayed close. She worked beside Mara, shared food, listened to her stories. Mara had lost her parents to fever, taken responsibility for her younger brother, and learned early that the world was not gentle. Yet bitterness never took root in her. She forgave quickly, loved fiercely, and believed goodness could still matter. Word of old Lynn spread among the pickers as someone strange but kind. Some mocked her softness, others protected her. Eleanor learned how easily the poor were blamed for crimes born in palaces. Each night, she returned to her hidden shelter and wept silently, mourning the years she had ruled without truly seeing. One afternoon, Prince Rowan himself rode through the district, disguised poorly as a merchant. Eleanor's heart stopped. He had come searching for her, sensing something wrong. From behind a stack of crates, she watched her son speak to Mara, watched him listen as if her words mattered. Something warm and terrifying bloomed in Eleanor's chest. Rowan left with a thoughtful expression, unaware of how fate had brushed his sleeve. Eleanor realized then that her test was no longer hers alone. The danger surrounding Mara was real, and her son's heart was already moving without permission. As night fell, Eleanor understood the truth that shook her deepest certainty. Finding a good wife was no longer the question. Protecting a good woman from a broken world might cost her crown, her secrets, and the life she once believed unshakable forever. The next morning arrived heavy with consequences. Eleanor woke before the sun, her body aching from stone and worry alike. Whispers traveled quickly in the trash yards, and she learned the men in the black carriage belonged to Lord Varick, a noble known for crushing debts into chains. Mara's kindness had already placed her in a noose. Eleanor followed Mara to the market, watching her barter honestly while others lied. When a vendor overcharged an old woman, Mara intervened, offering her own coins instead. The gesture drew stares, some admiring, some cruel. Eleanor realized goodness often provoked anger from those who profit without it. By midday, Rowan returned, this time deliberately. Disguised still, he asked Mara about the district, about the children, about the river that carried both refuse and reflection. Eleanor listened nearby, heart pounding. She saw her son as she had always hoped he would be, attentive, gentle, unafraid of humility. Mara answered him openly, never once trying to impress. When Rowan offered to help her brother find medicine, Mara hesitated. Pride and fear warred in her eyes. "Only if you expect nothing back," she said. Rowan smiled, a quiet promise rather than a conquest. Eleanor turned away, tears blurring the street. This was the love she had prayed for, blooming in the least guarded soil. That evening, the black carriage returned sooner than warned. Lord Varick himself stepped out, silk coat gleaming like a threat. He announced that Mara's debt had doubled, punishment for defiance. The pickers scattered, leaving silence sharp as glass. Mara stood firm, shielding her brother. Eleanor felt the queen rise inside her like fire. She stepped forward, spine straightening, voice steady. "The debt is false," she said. "You prey on grief." Varick laughed, but something in her eyes unsettled him. "And who are you, trash woman, to accuse me?" Before Alinor could answer, Rowan appeared at her side. "Someone who speaks truth," he said calmly. He offered payment, far exceeding the demand. Varric accepted with a bow, already plotting. The carriage left, but danger lingered thicker than fog. When night fell, Rowan confronted Alinor beneath the bridge. "Mother," he whispered, recognition finally breaking through disguise. Shame and relief collided within her. She knelt, not as queen, but as a woman who had gambled with lives. Rowan lifted her gently. "You were trying to protect me," he said. Alinor confessed everything, her test, her fears, her discovery. Rowan listened, then looked toward Mara's dim window. "She doesn't need testing," he said softly. "She needs safety." Alinor understood then what shocked her most. The crown she guarded so fiercely mattered less than the legacy of mercy her son already carried forward, demanding courage from them both. Power had taught Alinor distance, but love demanded presence. She saw how easily authority could silence cruelty, yet how rarely it chose to listen. Tonight she vowed to rewrite her reign, beginning not from the throne but from the ground where hearts broke and healed together slowly. Morning revealed the damage fear had done overnight. Rumors spread that Lord Varric planned to claim Mara publicly, turning debt into ownership. The district buzzed with helpless anger. Alinor shed her disguise at dawn, returning to the palace unseen, carrying the smell of smoke and river on her skin. She summoned the council without ceremony. Faces paled as she entered wearing the crown. Alinor spoke of debts, cruelty, and hidden suffering. Some ministers protested tradition. She silenced them with a look sharpened by knights on stone. An investigation was ordered, swift and unforgiving. Yet justice moved slower than danger. Rowan returned to Mara with guards disguised as workers. He warned her gently, offering protection without command. Mara refused the palace, fearing separation from her brother and neighbors. "Safety that costs others is not safety," she said, steady and sad. Alinor arrived then, no longer old Lynn. The district knelt in shock. Mara stared, betrayal flashing before understanding dawned. Alinor bowed her head. "I tested nothing," she said. "I learned everything." She asked forgiveness, not obedience. Varric struck before sunset. His men seized Mara's brother, vanishing into alleys. Screams split the air. Rowan chased shadows, too late. The queen felt the kingdom tremble within her chest. Authority had failed its moment. Mara did not collapse. She gathered the pickers, the vendors, the quiet brave. They blocked streets, rang bells, and followed rumors like threads. Alinor watched awe replace doubt. Leadership, she realized, could rise without titles. At the river warehouse, Varric waited, confident behind guards. Alinor stepped forward alone. She offered abdication for the boy's release. Laughter echoed, then halted as Rowan revealed warrants and witnesses. The trap closed. Varric fell, raging, finally small. The boy ran into Mara's arms. The district exhaled. Alinor felt years lift from her shoulders. She had nearly lost everything to learn what truly must be guarded. That night, beneath lanterns and broken stars, Rowan asked Mara to walk beside him, not above or below. She agreed, eyes shining with cautious hope. Alinor watched them, knowing shock had remade her reign. Love had rewritten power, and the kingdom would never return to sleep unchanged. Drums echoed as neighbours celebrated, but Alinor withdrew to listen. She planned reforms shaped by hands she had held. Debt laws would soften, councils would open, and princes would serve unseen yearly. She would teach Rowan patience and learn it herself. When dawn returned, the river looked cleaner, though nothing magical had happened. People had. From that night, stories spread, warning nobles and comforting the poor. The Queen had walked among them, been afraid, and chosen differently. Shock became seed, mercy became policy, and somewhere between rags and regalia, Eleanor finally understood the measure of a crown. Her promise lingered quietly, binding future chapters with humility, courage, and watchful love, ensuring the kingdom remembered that justice begins when leaders listen, step down, and rise again, change together beyond fear and pride forever for their children, neighbours, and unseen tomorrow ahead. After the warehouse fell silent, the kingdom did not immediately heal. Fear lingers longer than noise. Eleanor returned to the palace carrying gratitude and doubt. She knew one rescue could not undo years of neglect, and that true change would demand patience sharper than any sword wielded by rulers alone. Rowan visited the district daily, refusing ceremony. He listened, worked, and learned names. Mara watched him cautiously, measuring promises against effort. When he cleaned wounds and mended roofs, trust grew quietly. Eleanor observed from afar, resisting the urge to intervene or protect him excessively as a mother would someday soon. The council resisted reforms fiercely. Merchants feared losses, nobles feared precedent. Eleanor faced them with stories instead of decrees. She spoke of Mara's bread, the boy's wound, and the river's patience. Silence followed, heavy and transformative, as votes shifted reluctantly toward mercy under watchful public eyes across the whole realm. Mara struggled with attention. Some praised her, others accused ambition. She answered neither, focusing on her brother's schooling and neighbors' needs. Rowan admired her restraint, learning that love required space. Their walks were simple, filled with listening, laughter, and shared uncertainty about futures not yet written by fate, time, together. Threats did not vanish with Varric's arrest. Shadows adapt. Eleanor strengthened courts, protected witnesses, and invited common voices. Each policy carried resistance, yet progress held. She remembered sleeping beneath bridges, using that memory to weigh decisions against lived reality rather than convenience or comfort of entrenched power structures alone ever. One night, Rowan confessed fear. Loving Mara meant exposing her to danger. Eleanor answered gently, admitting her own terror. Power could shield, but hiding truth corrodes trust. They agreed to walk openly, guarding each other through transparency and shared responsibility before the people, despite risks known and unknown ahead together. The engagement was announced without spectacle. No jewels dazzled, no parades roared. Instead, kitchens cooked, schools sang, and debts softened. Mara insisted on apprenticeships and clinics. Rowan endorsed budgets publicly. Celebration felt earned, cautious, and profoundly communal across neighborhoods long ignored by power, history, fear, and neglect once endured together. Eleanor prepared abdication papers, testing resolve. Rowan refused them kindly, asking guidance instead. She smiled, understanding leadership could teach without leaving. The shock that began in rags now steadied into purpose. Queens could change, and so could kingdoms, when humility anchors authority in living hearts, laws, and daily service shared. Mara visited the river, remembering scarcity. She vowed to keep listening, especially when praised. Rowan joined her, learning silence again. They planned slowly, aware love matures with work. Happiness arrived not as rescue, but as partnership forged steadily through seasons of challenge and mutual care, patience and grace enduring always. Thus the kingdom breathed differently. From trash yards to thrones, values shifted. Eleanor kept rags beside robes, a reminder. The story shocked because it stayed true. Power bowed to kindness, and the future leaned closer to justice through ordinary choices made daily by brave people, awake, together, at last, home. The weeks after the engagement tested every promise made in quieter hours. Opposition hardened, subtle and sharp, as those displaced by reform whispered of chaos. Eleanor sensed storms before they broke, remembering how silence once fooled her. She convened open hearings in the square, inviting anger to stand beside hope beneath the same sun. Mara spoke last. She refused prepared words, choosing honesty instead. She described hunger without poetry, fear without spectacle, and dignity without demand. The crowd shifted, recognizing itself. Rowan listened, learning that leadership sometimes meant yielding the center so truth could breathe. Retaliation came swiftly. Fires flared in storehouses blamed on reforms. Pamphlets smeared Mara as an imposter seeking power. Guards urged protection. Mara declined isolation. "Let me walk," she said. "If I stumble, help me rise where people can see." Eleanor allowed it, hands trembling with maternal restraint. One night, an arrow struck the palace gate bearing a warning. Rowan stood before Eleanor, anger bright and young. She steadied him, reminding him that justice without patience becomes vengeance wearing law's mask. They chose investigation over spectacle, care over fear, and waited. Evidence surfaced through the new councils, paid agitators, forged debts, coordinated lies. Trials followed, public and fair. Some guilty confessed, surprised by mercy offered with consequence. Others fled. The kingdom learned that accountability could coexist with compassion without collapsing order. Mara's brother fell ill during the unrest. Old anxieties returned, sharp as winter. Rowan stayed at his bedside, reading softly. Eleanor brought physicians and paid anonymously, preserving dignity. The boy recovered, smiling sleepily at the prince he now trusted like a brother. On recovery day, Mara wept in private. Eleanor found her by the river. They spoke as women, not symbols. Eleanor apologized again, not for disguise, but for the years lost before listening. Mara forgave her, not as favor, but as freedom. The river carried their reflections onward. The council ratified reforms by narrow margin. Eleanor accepted the risk, signing with steady hand. She announced annual service for nobles, apprenticeships funded by levies, and debt review courts staffed by mixed voices. Shock rippled, then settled into work. As autumn colored the city, Rowan and Mara planted trees along the riverbank. Children helped, muddy and proud. Eleanor watched roots disappear into soil, patient and unseen. She understood then that the crown's truest metal was trust, hammered slowly by shared labor. Night returned gentler. Bells rang for gatherings, not alarms. The story spread beyond borders, distorted and bright. Yet within the kingdom, change felt quieter than rumor. It felt like breathing. And for the first time, Eleanor slept without disguises nearby, knowing vigilance remained, but fear no longer ruled her waking heart. She dreamed of bridges mended, children taught, debts forgiven, and rulers listening. Morning came with resolve renewed. She rose early, tied plain shoes beside silk ones, and wrote a vow to govern with eyes open, hands steady, and courage shared among neighbors, councils, streets, seasons, storms, doubts, hopes, work, love, truth, together. Winter arrived early, pressing frost against windows and resolve against hearts. Eleanor sensed a final trial approaching, the kind history prefers before peace. Border lords petitioned alliance through marriage, offering armies, threatening isolation. The old game returned, polished and persuasive. Rowan refused immediately, but Eleanor asked him to listen. Strength, she reminded, includes foresight. They convened the councils, inviting Mara to speak. Murmurs rose. A future queen addressing war unsettled tradition more than reforms ever had. Mara spoke calmly. She honoured caution, acknowledged danger, and refused fear. Alliance built on bodies, she said, would rot. Trade, aid, and shared law could bind stronger. She offered service before sovereignty, proposing relief convoys instead of rings. The border lords scoffed publicly. Privately, hunger spoke louder. Winter storms ruined stores. Eleanor authorised grain, medicine, and engineers, sending Rowan and Mara together. No banners flew. They crossed mountains quietly, hands blistered, trust tested. They found villages colder than rumour. Children shivered. Mara organised kitchens. Rowan repaired roads. Eleanor followed later, unannounced, carrying ledgers and blankets. When a blizzard trapped them, nobles and villagers shared one hall. Discovering survival ignores rank. News spread of aid without conquest. The border lords' leverage softened. One by one they signed accords recognising mutual courts and open trade. No marriage required. Shock echoed beyond borders. Power had chosen patience. Yet sacrifice demanded its price. Eleanor fell ill on the return, fevered from exposure. Rowan kept vigil, terrified of losing the woman who had finally stepped down to stand beside him. Mara prayed without spectacle, holding Eleanor's hand. Delirious, Eleanor confessed regrets and gratitude. She named Rowan king before witnesses, not by death but decision. The council accepted, awed. She recovered slowly, lighter, content to guide from shadow. Spring arrived uncertain but bright. Rowan's coronation was modest. Mara stood beside him, not crowned yet, insisting work precede vows. The people cheered anyway, recognising continuity of care. On the riverbank, Eleanor watched saplings bud. The shock that began in disguise ended in choice. Kingdoms, she learned, survive not through perfect rulers, but through brave transitions, shared burdens, and love practiced publicly, imperfectly, together. She reflected on councils arguing, streets listening, and kitchens feeding strangers. Authority, once distant, now felt accountable, audible, human. The Queen Emerita resolved to remain visible enough to be questioned and quiet enough to learn. She established ledgers anyone could read, courts anyone could enter, and days when rulers served without escort. Critics persisted, but momentum held. The kingdom discovered resilience in routines, hope in fairness, and courage in shared effort. As winter loosened, trade flowed, children studied, and laughter returned cautiously. Eleanor smiled, knowing endings are beginnings disguised, and that shock had opened a door. Beyond it waited work, unglamorous and constant, but honest. She stepped through with steady breath, trusting the people she finally saw. The river kept flowing, bearing witness, while the kingdom learned daily that care, courage, and listening could govern better than fear, force, or forgotten privilege for future generations everywhere to remember.
Years later, the story settled into something quieter than legend. Children learned it not as shock, but as instruction, a reminder that crowns are tools, not miracles. Eleanor, now gray and bright-eyed, walked the river each morning, greeting workers by name, carrying bread instead of seals. Rowan ruled with a steady patience earned in mud and meetings. He listened longer than he spoke, published mistakes beside successes, and insisted that policies be tested where people lived.
Mara became queen slowly. Only after clinics opened, debts eased, and councils stabilized. Her coronation featured apprentices, farmers, and teachers standing closest. Together they codified service as inheritance. Princes and nobles spent seasons cleaning streets, staffing courts, and learning trade. The riverbanks blossomed with trees planted by hands once idle. Crime fell not by fear but by belonging. Eleanor kept one relic from her past life, the torn shawl of old Lynn. She displayed it in the council hall without explanation. When asked, she said simply that it remembered her for her. Visitors paused before it, understanding without being told. On the anniversary of the warehouse night, the kingdom gathered quietly. No speeches were given. Food was shared. Names of those harmed by old debts were read, followed by names of those who repaired what they could. The list grew shorter each year. Mara's brother became a healer, returning often to the river house. He taught children to wash wounds and listen. Rowan joined lessons when he could, sleeves rolled, laughter easy. Power no longer embarrassed him, indifference did. When storms came, as they always do, the systems held. Councils argued, courts adjusted, aid moved. The kingdom bent instead of breaking. Neighbors helped neighbors because the law had taught them how. Eleanor passed one spring morning with the river singing. She was buried without jewels. Rowan placed the shawl upon the earth, and Mara planted a tree. The people mourned honestly, then returned to work she had trusted them to do. Years later still, travelers told the tale with wonder. A queen became poor, a poor woman became queen, and a kingdom learned to listen. The shock was not disguise or romance, but continuity. Justice endured because ordinary courage did. At dusk, children played along the water, watched by elders who remembered. The river carried reflections forward, and the crown, lighter now, rested where it belonged, upon a shared promise to see one another again and again. They taught the story in schools and markets alike, not to praise rulers, but to practice care. Children debated laws, elders shared memories, and strangers found welcome at tables. When mistakes happened, apologies followed, then repair. The kingdom accepted that perfection was impossible, but participation was not. In this way, the shock matured into wisdom, and wisdom into habit, carried forward quietly by everyone who chose to notice, help, and listen. Thus the river kept flowing, and the people kept choosing, day after day, to build a just home together for generations yet unborn. The end.
Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel for more powerful stories. Comment your thoughts below. Thank you.